Well, hello. My name is Shelley Fan, and I am the CEO and founder of Ask Shelley Consulting LLC, coming to you live every Tuesday at 12 to share a question that was asked of me. And I do this on these platforms in the hopes that you will be able to get something, some point of information, some new fact, some revelation, some reminder that you can add to your wellness toolbox. I'm a psychotherapist here in Florida, and I have the privilege of partnering with people who want to overcome emotional injury on many different levels. This is no attempt to replace that process. This is not therapy. This is just an opportunity for me to provide a perspective. It gives my listeners an opportunity to provide perspective as well. And so I encourage you to comment. I encourage you to share. I encourage you to engage. You guys are a part of my consultation team, so I do appreciate your feedback. I appreciate your shares. Be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel. You can find me on YouTube at Ask Shelley. Subscribe to unlimited access to me and my perspectives. Thank you again for tuning in. We're going to jump right into this question today, something that has been a hot topic here in our community and beyond. And so I definitely would love for you to engage. Hello, Prophet Kimberly Scott. Thank you so much for joining this week's Ask Shelley segment. Hello, Shireen, Nikki again. Hello. We're going to go ahead and get started with this week's Ask Shelley question. Here we go. Still no glasses, but they're coming. Dear Ask Shelley, I am pissed about this injustice. I know everyone's timeline is flooded with angry people talking about getting guns and protecting ourselves, our families, and our children. For some reason, I feel like I am taking this differently than most. I lose sleep over this type of stuff all of the time. I hate the uprising of anger every time there is an incident, but we all go back to business as usual in a month or two, then have another uprising when another not guilty verdict is announced. And a few months after that, we go back to business as usual. Why do we do that? What causes people to get all hot and bothered and shrink back when the hype goes away? So I have to deal with anger and frustration toward my own people, which is just a multiplication of the utter disgust I have toward the offenders who do not have 1 ounce of value for Black lives. Just want you to speak on this. Wow. Hello, Carla. Thank you so much for tuning into this week's Ask Shelley segment. Pretty heavy. I would love to hear your feedback on this. I will be repeating the question for all those who are tuning in a little bit later. Wow, I would love your feedback on this. So please assure you engage. All of our opinions and our feedback is valuable, and it is okay for us to agree to what? Disagree. That's what adults do. We agree to disagree, we value the input of others, and we continue to stand true to our moral fiber. So here we go. I'm going to repeat the question. Dear Ask Shelley, I am pissed about this injustice. I know everyone's timeline is flooded with angry people talking about getting guns and protecting ourselves, our families, and our children. For some reason, I feel like I am taking this differently than most. I lose sleep over this type of stuff all of the time. I hate the uprising of anger every time there is an incident, but we all go back to business as usual in a month or two, then have another uprising when another not guilty verdict is announced. And a few months later, we go back to business as usual. Why do we do that? What causes people to get all hot and bothered and shrink back when the hype goes away? So I have to deal with the anger and frustration toward my own people, which is just a multiplication of the utter disgust I have toward the offenders who do not have 1 ounce of value for Black lives. just want you to speak on this. So again, my consultants, feel free to chime in about your perspective on this issue, this topic of injustice in our communities. And I will definitely provide a perspective as well, highlighting some points. Again, it's about me as providing information and feedback based on my expertise. And politics is definitely not one of them, but I definitely feel that what the feedback that I have and the feedback that you have is valuable. So here we go. The first thing I want to say is, oh my God, thank you for your email. Thank you for reaching out. I think it's important that we have these discussions so long as they are followed by some type of activation. And I'll be talking a little bit about that later on in this segment. And so I want to start by talking about trauma, because there was a lot of questions asked in this, like, why do we get so riled up? And then the next thing you know, it's like, where did it all go? Where did all this passion go, anger go? Where did all of it go, right? That is one of the questions that this writer is asking. So I want to start off by saying this. Let's talk about trauma. Let us talk about trauma. That's that red lipstick. Woohoo! Okay. So trauma, we've talked about it on this segment before, is an exposure to an experience or a series of experiences that surpass our ability to cope. And as a result of that, causes emotional injury. That emotional injury can fall on a large spectrum, where it's causing minimal dysfunction, our day-to-day functioning, all the way to making us and rendering us completely dysfunctional in our day-to-day functioning, right? That emotional injury can cause psychotic symptoms. It can cause some disruption in sleep. It is on a spectrum. But we know that this is an exposure to an experience or a series of experiences that have overcome our ability to cope. As a result of that, it has caused some level of emotional injury. There is something called secondary trauma. And this is when we are in a position where we observe the trauma of someone else. And as a result, it causes emotional injury as well. This emotional injury, when it's secondary, falls on the same spectrum that I just said, where it is just minor injury or minor impact to our day-to-day operations in life, or completely significant, right? And so there are some factors that would determine how probable, if you will, it is that someone would experience secondary traumatic stress, right? I want to focus on the top two factors. The top two factors that increases the chances of someone experiencing secondary trauma. The first one is, how similar are the characteristics between the observer and the person who's actually experiencing this aversion, right? Or experiencing this injustice, experiencing this crime, whoever the victim is, right? How similar are the characteristics? Studies show that the more similar the characteristics are, the higher the probability, higher the chances that observers who are similar to this victim will experience traumatic stress. So what characteristics am I talking about? I'm talking about demographics, age range, race, socioeconomic status. So the more similar these characteristics are with the victim or the person who's experiencing the direct trauma, right? That's having direct experience with this aversive, incident or traumatic incident, higher the chances that we too will experience traumatic stress. That's one. The second thing that we're focusing on for this segment, while there's many, is the probability that it can happen to us, okay? So we're talking about secondary trauma. So we understand, we've defined what trauma is, we've defined what secondary trauma is, and now we're determining what increases the chances that we will experience secondary trauma off of an aversive incident. We talked about number one, the those similarities between the victim and ourselves, right? Those socioeconomic, those demographics that are similar, that would increase the chances that someone would experience traumatic stress. And the second is the probability of this incident happening to us. So let's talk about this recent incident. We're talking about the jogging incident that ended up in a very upsetting and infuriating murder. What are the chances that this can happen to myself? What are the chances that this can happen to any one of you that's listening? And the chances are very probable. It is very probable that we would be in a situation where we are in a community that we're not necessarily accepted and can be a victim of a hate crime. And so because we have some similarities in characteristics, right? Some similarities with socioeconomic status, demographics, etc. Because this is extremely probable, it now increases and enhances traumatic stress in many people. Even when it is you are a mother or a family member of someone or a friend of someone that has those similarities and characteristics too, that would cause you some concern because of the love that you have for people. And so when we're talking about this outpour of sentiments, this outpour of anger, this outpour of passion, this outpour of a cry for help, we are looking for some people, this is causing them traumatic stress. And so this writer is saying, this has got to be impacting me more than other people, because beyond going onto social media and expressing how angry I am, I'm having a hard time sleeping. I'm having a hard time concentrating. And so these are signs that we are experiencing traumatic stress. So again, some other symptoms, interruption of sleep, difference in your appetite, whether you're overeating, undereating, you're feeling restless, you're feeling consumed by the incident. These are all manifestations of traumatic stress. Remembering that for some people, it's hitting on the severe side of the spectrum and they are really having a hard time with it. So that's the answer to the question about, everyone is upset and they're on timelines and this must be hitting me differently because I can't sleep. I think it's important for us to understand it, because especially we have a lot of people that that tune in every week, people that I interact with that have very high levels of resilience. And I am not saying there's anything wrong with that at all. However, sometimes that resilience causes us to not be aware of how we are emotionally reacting and emotionally responding to a stimulus. And so sometimes it's important just to stop, just to breathe and ask yourself, how is this impacting me? And we often do not do this. And the writer is saying, I'm not sleeping. This is how upset I am about this. I am not sleeping. And I think it's okay. I think it's important to be aware of it. I think it's important to understand where it comes from. We have to understand trauma. We have to understand secondary trauma. And we have to understand how it impacts us. I remember one time, very recent, I did a workshop on suicide prevention, specifically as it is related to African American males. And so I was on a panel and the audience were African American males. And someone on the panel started talking about ACEs, right? And talked about the impact of aversive childhood experiences and how that really impacts us in our adulthood, and how we tend to just continue to function with a lot of unresolved trauma, and how it impacts African American males. African American in their adulthood or in their adolescence or in their phase of adolescence. And there was a gentleman that raised his hand and he said, I read I read that survey, and, I kind of laughed and chuckled, like, these are not things that are traumatic to the people in our community. This is our everyday experience. This is how we live. So a lot of the things on that survey, and you can Google it if you've never read or know anything about it, it's ACEs, ACES. It just measures the degree to our exposure to aversive childhood experiences, which then kind of determines our the chances of us experiencing less than optimal mental health. That's basically it. And so he says that I read that survey and I thought, this is not something that would be traumatic for anyone in our community. And I said, you know what? We have to understand that just because we are resilient, just because we can continue to function, does not necessarily mean that we are healed, because emotional injury can manifest itself in many different ways. You may think like, okay, my inability to commit, or my inability to manage my anger, my inability to take my emotions and formulate words, my inability to complete projects, and you may say that it's something else. You may call it ADHD. You may call it that you're creative. You may call it that you're not disciplined. Whatever it is, you call it. A lot of the times we're not understanding the connection between the unpleasant manifestation in our life, or how we are attracting undesired outcomes. A lot of the times we are not connecting it to unresolved emotional injury. Understand, whether you acknowledge it or not, whether you think that you are resilient enough that it's not traumatic, it's not impacting you in a negative way, understand that the emotional injury will do exactly what it is designed to do. It is designed to become a malignant tumor that will find its way out somehow, whether it's in your relationships, the way that you manage your money, the way that you address your career goals, the way that you perceive the world. Emotional injury will continue to do exactly what it is designed to do. That's to steal, kill, destroy. That is to keep you from being the best version of yourself. And so we have to stop measuring or counting resilience as some sort of sign that we are healed or not. All right? And so let's now talk. So we talked about trauma. We talked about secondary trauma. I want to talk about our survival brain. Our survival brain. And so many of us are experiencing these extreme emotions right now. So I want you to know that your brain is doing what it's designed to do, and that is to protect you. And so when our survival brain is activated, right? It's been activated with this pandemic. It's been activated with this, this upsetting shooting. It's activated right now. And when your survival brain becomes activated, there's certain things that happen. Number one, the emotional centers of your brain are on a full 10. If 10 is as high as it can get, if 10 is explosive, right? That's what happens to the emotional centers of our brain. And when we are there, and when that area of our brain is ignited, it causes us to not necessarily function effectively with some higher order thinking that happens on the front side of our brain, right? It's almost like the two can't lead the parade together. So the more activated you are emotionally, the less that you can actually engage in planning that's important to take your passion and make it effective. And so when the emotional centers of our brain are in full-blown activation mode, we tend to see everything as a threat, right? So we're no longer trustworthy. We're looking to survive. It's about fight or flight, and how can I protect myself, my family, and all those things are okay. We should engage in that level of thought, or that nature of thought, in order to protect ourselves, right? We're talking about survival brain. Our brains are designed to protect us. Sometimes that protection will also keep you bound. That's a whole different topic, right? When your brain is saying no risk, we can't take any risk. It's not safe to take risks. No, you can't do that. You're not qualified. Sometimes the protection that our brain gives us will also keep us bound. And so it's important that we we have awareness, where we can take authority in our emotional space so we can think effectively, we can act effectively, and we're not just operating on emotions. This writer is saying, why do we do that as a people? Why do we get all emotional and it's on everyone's timeline for a couple of months and then it just goes away? That is because we're operating in emotions and not allowing those emotions to transfer into high order thinking that's required for action. Emotions come and go. And so that is why you see a flooding of timelines and then everything goes away. So the not guilty verdict comes out, then everybody gets upset again. We are an out of sight, out of mind society. Out of sight, out of mind society. Unfortunately, being why most of us, while there's other factors that long distance relationships are difficult, we are an out of sight, out of mind society, right? My timeline was not flooding with Kobe Bryant anymore. Is yours? Let me know. I want to hear from you guys. How many of you have continued flooding of images of Kobe Bryant in your timeline right now? Let me hear it. If it's you, say me. If it's not you, say not I. Not I. Let me hear from you. Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. Not I. Well, I can answer. Not me. Not I. And so we have to make sure that we are not reacting and we are responding. So how do we do that? How do we get ourselves outside of our survival brains that's just an auto zone and we are, all emotional stimulation, not necessarily engaging in high order thinking. We just want to go out, we want to get guns, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. But how can we now get our frontal lobe, this part of our brain, how can we get it to be activated? How do we activate it? And I want to read something to you guys that a very, very close friend of mine said to me last year. And then I'm going to talk about how do we get that frontal lobe ignited so we're not just operating on emotions and we're actually operating in a place of power. Power being the capacity to influence outcomes in the earth. Power is the capacity to influence outcomes in the earth. So let me read it to you guys. Let me read it. And it says, and I love her. She's an amazing woman. She's doing her things on the mountain of politics, right? We all have a mountain that we are called to dominate in. And so if you are the one that is losing sleep over this and you cannot eat and you are significantly impacted, then turn that passion into a strategic plan and be the catalyst that we need to turn this around. Let me say it again. If that's you, you're losing sleep, you can't eat, you're so impacted by this, turn that passion into a strategic plan. Be the catalyst that we need. And it says, we must be persistent in trying to get everyone involved, no matter how minimal. We are not present, counted, or heard in decision-making that matters on local levels, whether it is school, town, etc. Let me say that again. We are not present, counted, or heard in decision-making that matters on local levels. A lot of us feel that we're doing something when we are engaging in voting in presidential elections. And I'm not saying that's wrong. Great. That's awesome. But there are many other lower level or local opportunities to be a voice. That is why changes are made that affect our children, and we know nothing about it until it is too late. As it relates to the specific question asked, issues related to race and police departments are all issues of policy that can be changed if enough pressure is put on elected officials and policymakers. This is another reason that it is so important that we have the right elected officials in office, which is why it is important to vote. Most changes that have been made related to policing and policy that protect our communities come as a result of community advocacy and mobilization of communities. We must be part of the conversation so that we make sure our voices are heard. Complaining in the background, not speaking out, and not sharing our experiences is actually what will guarantee that nothing will change. The only way that we have hope is if we are a part of the process on all issues. I am not only talking about issues that are clearly Black, but issues as a whole. Our country's population is rapidly diversifying. Already, more than half of babies born in the United States are people of color. By 2030, the majority of young workers will be people of color. And by 2044, the United States will be a majority people of color nation. So looking at that, all policies will be policies that will impact us and as people of color. Racial and income inequality is already high and persistent. Wages have stagnated for the majority of workers, and many people of color face racial and geographic barriers to accessing economic opportunities. We have to be a part of the process. And as they say, if you are not at the table, you are not on the menu. If you are not at the table, you are not on the menu. We need a seat at the table. So when you are experiencing these emotional reactions, right, to anger, right, you know what? I want to make sure that we understand this too, because we talked about awareness, right? Anger is like the color black. Anger is like the color black. The color black is a combination of all colors on the spectrum, on the color spectrum. That's black, right? And so anger is very much like that. It is a combination of multiple emotions that someone is feeling, and the manifestation of it is anger. And so it's important for us to really dive into and unpeel the onion and recognize all those emotions that have culminated to cause this anger, right? So let's be real about it. What are those emotions? What are all those emotions combined that's causing this anger? Fear, truth be told, right? Frustration, uncertainty, confusion, powerlessness, hopelessness. There's so many mindsets, thoughts, and emotions that are wrapped into the emotion of anger. And the way to assure that we can turn that anger into a more productive state of mind is to be able to unpeel the onion and recognize all of the things that are causing this anger. When we are feeling powerless, we tend to defer, right? We tend to go into AutoZone. We tend to land on an emotion that's easiest for us. And for a lot of people, it's much easier to be angry than disappointed. Much easier to be angry than fearful. Most of us anger has become very comfortable for us. And so nothing changes in a state of comfort. Let me say that again. Nothing changes in a state of comfort. Discomfort is almost inevitable and necessary for true change, transformation, and revolution to happen. And so let's talk about it. Let's really dig down deep into your anger and let's turn into something productive. This is what I do. How do you get people to not necessarily be fully lost in their emotional space? And how do we get the frontal lobe activated? How do we get our thinking activated? You ask yourself, what can I learn in this process? What can I do in this process? How can I be a part of the answer? What is it that I can do, right? What can I learn from this? How can I grow from this? What can I do to be a part of the answer? What can I learn from this? How can I grow from this? What can I do to be a part of the answer? That is really important. That's important for us to ask ourselves and to make sure that everything that we're doing is stimulating forward movement. I am okay with people venting and using social media as a way to express themselves, but it cannot stop there. So, sir, you wrote in and said, this has got to be me. There's got to be something wrong with me. There isn't. The fact that you feel frustrated with the fact that there are so many emotional people that fall to the wayside when we most need it. When things are quiet and we don't have headliners on the news is when we should be working sleepless and tirelessly toward justice. And so it's important for people to recognize their mountain and to dominate in their mountain and to do your piece. Not everybody is called to be a catalyst. Not everybody is called to be the next Martin Luther King. I'm not declaring that at all, but we all have a responsibility to be a part of the body, right? I'm doing my part as the elbow. Are you doing your part as the toes, the ankle, the knee? Come on now. Everybody has a role in the answer. So ask yourself, what can I do to be a part of the answer? How can I be productive? How can I watched a live the other day and there were so many lives that were literally making me sick. Like, give us something, some nugget that would help us to grow and empower us to be an impact. And so I was watching a live. It was the Don Miller show. It was live. I believe it was on Friday. I'm not sure where he went live. And there was an attorney that was on the live, and she was commenting, and she said, we need to understand policy. The people in power understand how to make the law work for them. So not only do they understand the law, they understand how to apply the law, which is a completely different skill set. That we have to learn policy. We have to learn law. We have to understand how to apply it to benefit us. There were books that were recommended. Oh boy, let me see. I believe I screenshotted it. I really hope I do, because if you want to leave here and you want some type of plan of action, then put this on your to-do list. Come on, where is it? Put this on your to-do list. It was a recommended 2 books that were recommended that we read. Okay, here it is. All right. The first one was Law 101. Write this down. And I will go into the comments and write this. They said there are 2 must reads when you want to empower yourself as it relates to policy, right? And the first one is Law 101. That is available online. She says that it's an extremely good book to buy. And the next one was You and the Law. You and the Law. And it's sold by the American Bar Association. I don't know much about this. This is not my expertise. But listen, I wrote it down and I am going to get it. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for writing that down, Mr. Rutledge. Law 101. That's Law 101, which is available online. And the next one is You and the Law. You and the Law, which is sold by the American Bar Association. And when you read that, then come on Facebook and Instagram Live and share the knowledge. Because sometimes the Bible says that anger falls, that anger lies, Help me, precious. That anger dwells in the bosom of a fool. Did I say that right? help me, you Bible scholars, right? And so we got to be careful that we're not foolish, but that we are changing our passion and channeling our passion into a strategic plan that would cause forward movement in our communities. You want to vent? Just make sure it's productive. Make sure it's uplifting. Drop a fact. Let us know if you're go live or post about who your elected officials are in your community, right? Tell people when you have an issue with something, these are the town hall meetings that you go to. These are the appropriate topics that you could bring up. This is how you get on the agenda. Post about that. Post about how to get on the agenda. Who do you speak to? Who are the big wigs in your community that have to give you an audience? Give us meat, things that will cause us to come out of a place of emotionality and into productivity. I love your question, sir. And I want you to feel empowered, get the support that you need to help channel those emotions and that anxiety and everything else that comes along with why you're feeling this distress. It's important that you're decompressing in a very healthy way, right? Because there are very unhealthy ways that we can relieve ourselves of distress. It's important to do it in a healthy fashion so you can be effective in your assignment in the earth. A lot of the times when there are things that cause us to be heated and angry, upset, that is where your purpose lies. Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's Ask Shelley segment. I would love for you guys to just stop what you're doing, jump onto YouTube and subscribe to my YouTube channel, Ask Shelley. I would love for you guys to submit your questions. Submit your questions to info@askshelley.com, and we will use your question to facilitate an Ask Shelley segment. Listen, it's those questions that you have that you may not feel comfortable sharing in public that will be an opportunity for breakthrough for someone else. So send your questions to info@askshelley.com. For individual or group support, you can email info@askshelley.com for your consultation with me. We do have a COVID-19 special right now where we have waived all consultation fees. So grab a hold of that, take advantage of that. Again, email info@askshelley.com. You can also connect with me from my website, www.askshelley.com. If you are looking for a speaker on your next live, on your panel, at your next conference, feel free to connect with me, www.askshelley.com. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for investing in your wellness. Assure that you share. Assure that you follow up with proactivity. Remember that you owe the world your gifts. You owe me that. You owe us that. That book, that song, that podcast, that YouTube channel. Be empowered to be all that you can be and understand that living in your smile is possible. You just have to learn the skills needed to live in your smile. Your breakthrough is on the other side of something you do not know. So continue to avail yourself to new information, to be a never-ending student of this thing called life. And remember that you are qualified, you are equipped to dominate in your sphere of influence. So make sure you do it big, be great, dominate, and be all that God has not only called you to be, but has qualified you to be. I will see you next Tuesday at 12 o'clock. Don't forget to send in your questions to info@askshelley.com. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel, Ask Shelley. Until next time, dominate.